welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. Guys, I want to party like it's 2001. You know, E3 2001 for me is something that I think about almost every holiday season. It's not the first video I make on it because it's such a special time in gaming, at least for me. If you were around during those times, you probably will agree with me that there was nothing better than seeing those four banners up there. Nintendo, right, with their GameCube. The Xbox was up there, right? You had PlayStation, you know, and of course you had Sega. Four companies with very different interpretations of what video games should be, you know, and it was a time completely different than today. Today, you know, unfortunately, you know, video games are ruined by uniformity. You know, the disease of Fortnite, if you will, which is a fun game for kids. Of course it is. But it's ruined a lot of companies to become more profit-oriented, more focus-oriented. You know, of course, all companies are profit-oriented, but because of the success of Fortnite and games like that, they've all, you know, switched over to that business model. And unfortunately, not everybody can be Fortnite. And because of that, a lot of creativity has been ruined. And everything's being looked through the corporate lens. That's even affected Nintendo now. And a lot of people say, hey, you know, we didn't know how good we had it back then. Not me. I knew how good we had it back then, right? Everybody has different experiences, guys. And like I always tell you, look, we've talked about this stuff forever, but everybody's experience is different. Your experience might be different than mine. I can tell you my experience. When 2001 was going on, I knew exactly how good we had it. And the reason I knew is because I was broke as a joke, man. When it came to my gaming budget, you know, I was working really hard to provide for my family, but I didn't have much, you know, as far as, you know, purchasing power to buy games. I barely had the PlayStation 2, and the only reason we had that is because it played movies, and it made sense to have a, you know, a device to play movies at home, right? You know, this is before Netflix, guys. The pre-Netflix days. And I, you know, my son and I and the kids and I would always go to the kiosks, right? Because in the kiosk you could play the Xbox. You know, I remember playing Oddworld back then, and I remember reading in the magazines about Halo, right? And you would get to the GameCube and you get this controller, man, and what a great controller that is. You know, it's a GOAT controller. But it also had different gaming experience. You know, the variety of gaming that you would have on the different consoles was amazing, right? You couldn't, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. The GameCube was not only about Mario. It was beyond that. Yeah, you had the Mario experiences, but games like Beautiful Joe, something that I've never seen before, right? Or Eternal Darkness. And I'm so thankful, guys, that I was able to play these games afterwards, that I was able to eventually get a GameCube, you know, after my kids were grown, after my kids, you know, had gone to college, that I finally could have a budget to do those kind of things. But I'm so glad that I went and got those things and experienced them, you know, not only in the kiosk like we used to do, not only reading in the magazines like we used to do, right? And we'd spend, you know, hours. One of my activities, you know, to practice reading with my kids would be to read the gaming magazines, you know. And I would buy sometimes magazines that are, you know, a couple of months old because they were on sale. And that's what I would read to them instead of reading them, you know, bedtime stories. I was trying to do some time management, so I would get the Game Pro, right? And I would read them the Game Pro. I would read them game reviews, you know, and I would show them the pictures. Oh, look, this game over here. And you know, the other thing that we had, you know, something that's up in the member section is the I have a folder. I have a folder of all my old jam packs. I think eventually I should make a video on that. It was kind of impromptu, guys, so I didn't edit it or anything. I just kind of flipped it over. So I left it in the member section. But I have all my jam packs. You know, I remember PlayStation Underground. I used to experience a lot of games that way. And, you know, and just reading in the magazines, but I remember so clearly, you know, those four banners up there, man. And you know, again, some people say, you know, we just didn't know how good we had it back then. You know, I knew how good we had it. I just couldn't afford it. But now looking through the eyes of time, through the eyes of today, man, doesn't a lot of us wish that we could go back to 2001 when you had four companies with just different visions. It doesn't matter what you can talk about a football game. All you have now is Madden, right? Imagine all the titles we had back then. You had just on the Dreamcast, you had the Y2K series, right? You had a Dreamcast that was sports themed. Sega was always like that, and competition is always good. Where you don't have these monopolies where you have to just be entered into these microtransactions. Why can't we just have a football game that's a good football game? So, monopolies, especially when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to art, don't always work. They don't always work, and corporate gaming has done a lot to stifle creativity, not only by imposing, certain mandates on creators, right? Yeah, they own the game and everything else, but you're trying to make something that's entertaining. When it comes to entertainment, when it comes to art, you can't write that in the manual. I can make, volumes of work instructions, right? But there is no way, right, that I can write a work instruction to make somebody creative. I can't just write, be creative, make a great game. That has to come from the artist. It has to come from inspiration. And that's what today's market is missing, because they're chasing dollars so much. Everybody's worried about being the next Fortnite, the next money-making, microtransaction game, that a lot of the creativity is gone. There are no incentives to make those, single or two-player experiences, to make people happy for a few moments. It has to be, a certain price. The game has to be a certain price, and it has to sell a certain amount of units. Does every game have to be $80, and last 80 hours? How about you make a 20-hour game for $20 and you sell a ton of those? But those aren't even things that AAA companies think about these days. They won't even open the doors to even think about those type of things. And I think that's unfortunate, right? And that's something that the industry is sorely missing, guys. That's why almost every Christmas, when I get into the game room, when I spend time here, and I look at a lot of these games, it takes me back to that moment. Because I've never been one of these fanboys that say, oh, I'm only going to play Atari, or I'm only going to play Intellivision, or I'm only going to play the ColecoVision. And, especially during that time, yeah, I had the PlayStation, because that's what I could afford at the moment, but I wanted everything. I always want everything. Because, game interpretations are different by different creators. And when you look at today's market, that's really, again, what is missing. It's all uniformity. Characters have to look a certain way. Games have to be a certain price. Microtransactions need to be included. So you're being sold half games so you can pay more money. We didn't have to worry about any of that stuff back then, man. We really had it great. I really hope that you guys lived through it and that you're able to appreciate it, because you still can now through retro collecting, through emulation. Maybe you have your own consoles. I don't care, guys. But let me tell you, a lot of times I do sample and I do have modern, consoles. I do, for very specific games. But by far, I spend the majority of the time enjoying my retro games. There's games like Death Stranding, right? That you can only play on a PlayStation 5. I love Kojima because he was one of the few ones left who was a true artist, right? There's others, but I'm just giving an example. But there's very few and far between of those in the industry now. That's why you got kicked out of Konami. You're not making enough money. You're costing us too much money making these games. All those people are being pushed out of the industry. Back in 2001, they were being brought in. Back in 2001, that's what you wanted. That's the difference in the market. How good we had it. Yes, we did. But at least you have a chance to relive old times. Doesn't matter how, guys. Go out and get your games, get your GameCube, get your Dreamcast, get your Xbox. you know, your PlayStation 2, it's all out there. All right, humans, thank you for joining me. I hope you guys are having a great holiday Christmas season. Hope you get all the presents that you deserve. I'll be making more videos because I have more time off during these times. So hopefully you'll join me. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos. And if you feel special, hey, join the channel. All right, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. I'll take you out with a new outro.
The Gen X Gamer channel is all about video games and game collecting, all for you. So make sure you like and subscribe. And if you feel extra special, join the channel for 99 cents.